This week for the Claw, we go to Lagos in Nigeria. Something we haven't done before. Femi Olahedin, I've been told by no less a luminary than Lerato Mbele that you're the best guy, the go-to guy in Lagos for perspectives about the Nigerian market. Well done on the election over the weekend, firstly. I want to ask you some real heart-to-heart type questions, though. For South Africans who perhaps don't have a proper perception of what is going on in Nigeria, what is your sense of where the country's future lies? Do you sense that in another decade or 2 decades the country will be richer, more stable, more prosperous, and the sense that you have of the investment opportunity that lies in Nigeria?
Paul, I think absolutely. You know, one of the perhaps shocking things that happened over the weekend is that, I mean, the kind of elections we saw yesterday, we haven't seen in 20 years. You know, the last time Nigerians came out to vote for just one guy, you know, and cut across all the regions, cut across race, you know, people just were not thinking about parties or whatever it is, happened last in 1993. So it appears that Nigeria has matured significantly in the last couple of years. And what that means from an economic point of view is that this is an economy that's probably going to take off now, because a lot of political risk that has been an issue for most people just seems to have disappeared. We've got a stronger president who's got the backing of virtually everybody across the country. I mean, he's winning votes in the northern part, he's winning votes in Lagos, in different parts of the country, which is great news, because what it means is that he's got a moral right to rule the country for the next 4 years. And he's got to get the support of everyone. From an economic point of view, I think we've gotten an idea of the kind of platform that he's going to run on, so which is excellent for Nigeria. I just think that this is a country that's about to see, you know, really good things going on.
Okay, fabulous. Now, I know that South Africans have a perception about Nigeria, but I'm interested in knowing what Nigerians' perceptions are of South Africans. For example, what's your take on why the South Africa inclusion into this BRICS thing happened when the founder of the concept was suggesting that a country like Nigeria with a much bigger population, much bigger kind of economic future on that account was not included? What's your sense of South Africans? Are we arrogant and sort of domineering from your point of view?
Paul, okay, haven't lived in South Africa for a while. I don't think that South Africans are arrogant or domineering. But I think the point to make is that, look, the South African economy has developed much quicker than the Nigerian economy. And that has ensured that South Africa has continued to play a leading role. And people continue to expect that that growth will continue. However, there's something that's quite key. Nigeria has actually just had 12 years of uninterrupted democracy. It's actually never happened in the 50 years post-independence. The economy is stable. We've got a central bank governor now that, you know, seems to be on top of things. We've got a president who's got the backing of the entire country. The reality is that, and there's still 150, 60 million odd people and the numbers we have is that about 70, 80% of those are still below the age of 25. So you're looking at an economy that has the right ingredients, if I could call it that, to actually show leadership. Now, if you look at GDP growth rates relative to South Africa, given the sort of figures that we have for Nigeria and South Africa, Nigeria should surpass South Africa in GDP within the next 10 years. So people who are talking about BRICS should start to look at the BRICS, because Nigeria is actually going to become an economy that they've got to, you know, reckon with, without a doubt.
Fabulous, fabulous. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the central bank governor, because he does really get a lot of positive feedback and he looks fabulous. But one of the things that worries me a little bit about investing in Nigeria is the currency. The fact that the Naira is sort of like a semi-free floating currency, that the market for that exchange gets made on a sort of a daily basis, is that something that you foresee changing in future? Because that would, I would imagine, be a net positive for people coming into the Nigerian market, is knowledge that there's a free floating currency going in one direction and the other.
Yes, I think that the currency challenge in Nigeria is one that's going to continue. Nigeria is quite passionate about the currency, and you know, the way Nigerians interpret the currency is almost like either government has failed or not. You know, so it's quite a touchy one for Nigerians. However, what is clear is that as we continue to see the economy open up, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the central bank to ensure that the Naira is completely free. What we have today is some form of guided trading around the currency, and it trades within a 3% band from a particular number that the central bank picks. What we see will happen going forward is that as the country continues to build up on its reserves, which is something that we've started to see since the beginning of this year, once we reflect that reserve pool, then the central bank government will become the central bank will become a bit more flexible in allowing the currency to trade. But what you're going to get, unlike the rand, is that you're not going to see an extremely volatile currency. Nigeria likes the currency to trade within a tight band, so that it gives a lot of stability even from a foreign investor point of view. So when you come in with your currency, you're likely to go out with it within 2 to 3% band, and you can factor that into your valuations when you're coming into the market.
Excellent. Okay, for some South African businessmen, the option, if you want to invest in Nigeria, is to get on a plane and go and open up a supermarket or something. But for those investors who are a little bit less, kind of adventurous, does the concept of opening a stockbroking account with a Nigerian broker, having some of your export allowance sent in that direction, buying publicly traded equities on your stock exchange, does that make sense? Is that something that people can do?
It's something that people should do. I mean, you've got to think about it, Paul. This is a country that's got, what, 160 million odd people. And as we talk about specific sectors where we see, above average growth, and we think that that's sustainable for the next 10, 15 years. So you're looking at a market that, has probably the right fundamentals. We suffered significantly from the global economic crisis, but that was also because the entire market itself wasn't exactly, the market depth and the breadth of the market wasn't exactly deep enough to be able to sustain the kind of cash flows that were coming in. But what you have now is that a lot more companies, are beginning to get listed on the market, and that means that the market starts to become a bit more reflective of the size of the Nigerian economy. Now, and if you continue to see that, then it's obvious that for a foreign investor who's looking for diversification in his portfolio and who's also looking for, a market that doesn't necessarily have a strong correlation with global markets, then Nigeria has got to be the place that you will be looking at.
Okay, so if one is looking at a long-term portfolio, in other words, you're looking over a 10 to 15-year period, you've taken a little bit of your kind of risk money in your entire portfolio and you're sending money into a Nigerian situation. I know some people would say just buy the biggest bank, by the largest consumer company, by the company that's most correlated with the infrastructure program, and then by the biggest telecommunications company. So on that basis, I don't even know whether my investigations at this level have been correct. One might put together a portfolio, Zenith Bank, Oando, Nestle Nigeria, Dangote Cement, and then maybe you buy MTN, or you have MTN at home in South Africa. I mean, does that sort of approach make sense? Or do you think one has to pay a bit more attention than that and get advice on the local scene?
Paul, I think if you were living in Lagos, you would actually be one of the super analysts, because you seem to have picked 5 of the top stocks that I was going to talk to you about. I mean, the reality is that when you look at the market, I say that if you're looking at the Nigerian market, especially the listed space, you should be looking at 5 key sectors: your petroleum marketing, the banking, the building materials, the FMCGs, fast-moving consumer goods, and to some extent the conglomerates. Those 5 sectors are a good enough reflection of the market, and if you look at the long-term trajectory for the economy, those guys will continue to drive the market. However, in terms of your stock picks, I would actually vary them a bit. I like the Zenith story, but I think GTB makes a bit more compelling story.
Okay.
Because GDP has proven over the last 20 years to have consistently sustained a growth trajectory. It's also one of the best in the market in terms of service. So when you're looking at the market and you're saying this market is going to actually contract in terms of the number of players, you're asking yourself, who are the guys who are going to benefit most from that contraction? I think that GTB will benefit significantly because they've got great service, they've got great management team. They're the only bank in Nigeria that I would say have successfully seen through transitions of CEOs, and that haven't impacted on.
Just give me the name of that one again. GTB or UCB?
Yeah, that's Guarantee Trust Bank.
Okay, GTB, got it.
Would be my top pick in the banking space, and perhaps maybe a Zenith will come a distant second. On the breweries, one sector you didn't talk about is actually the breweries. Believe it or not, per capita, Nigeria still has one of the lowest beer consumption per capita. And if you actually realize that 70% of the population is still below 18 who haven't started drinking yet. So you're looking at a sector that is likely to grow. So in building a portfolio for a Nigerian portfolio, I'll put a Guinness or a Nigerian breweries.
Yes, okay. Guinness
in that space.
Okay.
You know, so if you look at this, you know, you can actually isolate. Owando is a great story in the petroleum marketing space. You have seen that company grow from just a downstream operation, and now we're beginning to see a more diversified business. They've got a gas business, and with Nigeria being big on gas, I mean, one of the key cardinal points that President Jonathan has based his campaign on is this gas issue. Okay. And Owando is one of the companies that has won one of the major gas franchises. So you look at an Owando and you say, look, that's a company that would continue to grow and deliver stellar numbers. Nestle, without a doubt. Nestle is one of the companies, I think I'll put Nestle and Unilever in the same basket. Those guys pay out entire profits as dividends. So if you're looking for a growth story, that's also a very good yield story, that you would look at Nestle and Unilever, because they would always pay out 100% of their profits.
And then just in closing, the cement one, before we run out of time, Dangote Cement.
Yeah, I mean, Dangote Cement, the story is all over the place. They just signed a major agreement with Sinopec, the Chinese factory last week, which means that Dangote is going to see a lot more expansion across Africa. Dangote is one stock that I think should be listed in London before the end of the year. So you're seeing quite a lot of activity around it. And I think that the story for Dangote, if you look at the infrastructure challenge that Nigeria has, just has to be great from here.